No government owns us. No government owns us. We're too diversified. We have too many different citizenships and residencies and this and that. Like, we're not happy somewhere, we leave. We feel that there's pressure to educate our children a certain way. That's it. We change jurisdictions. We're completely free.
If you're within 3 feet of me, we're probably talking about real estate, much to my family's chagrin. But here's the thing. Most people see 7% rates and freeze. I see opportunity. They're waiting for the perfect deal, and well, I've analyzed thousands of them, and perfect just doesn't exist. So I talk to operators across every asset class, flippers, multifamily syndicators, note investors, and whatever else is working. No sales pitches allowed, just real lessons from people actually doing it. I'm Ed Matthews, and this is Real Estate Underground. Greetings and salutations, Real Estate Undergrounders. It is Ed Matthews again with the Real Estate Underground. Thank you again so much for all of your comments and letting us know what's resonating and what's not, frankly. That's one of the ways that we decide to take different directions. Obviously, this has historically been a multifamily apartment owners and investors show, but over the last 6 months, we've been taking the opportunity to talk with a whole bunch of other investors who do a whole bunch of other things. And today is a unique opportunity. This is someone that when I'm not trying to find the next deal and I need to just enjoy something for 20 minutes, I watch this gentleman's YouTube channel. And so it's some people like Anthony Bourdain. I like Ladislas Maurice, and I'm really happy to have him join us on the show today. Thank you very much for joining us. It's really good to meet you.
Thank you. The bar has been set really high, Ed.
That's okay. It's all right. It's only a couple of people listening, so you're good. Ladislas, if you could just do me a favor and tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do for a living, and then we'll get into it.
Sure, I'll just give a bit of background. Studied business in Canada, then went to business and law school in Australia, started working for Nestle, the big international food company in Switzerland, and then they expatriated me to Africa for 7 years. So I spent most of my 20s in Africa, actually. My last role there was managing the Nestle milk business for a few West African countries. So at the age of 30, I left because I was my 20s in Africa. Great, one company, time to move on, try something else.
Sure.
But before looking for a new job, I decided to go on a road trip with my parents that were retiring at that time. So we drove from Oman to Paris by car.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah, through the UAE, through all of Iran, Armenia, Georgia, all of Turkey, down to Greece, up to Ukraine, and then to Paris by car. And it was the first time that I had two things. One, a lot of time, and two, money. And that's actually really rare to have both time and money. So as we were driving around and traveling, we'd stop in these cities and I'd go out, I'd meet people, I'd go to real estate agencies, I'd meet lawyers, etc. And just along the way, I just saw opportunities like, gosh, this is some cheap real estate and I see the catalysts. So I started doing some deals and I never got back to looking for a job. So now it's been 9 years that I travel around the world full time with a focus on emerging and frontier markets. I invest primarily in real estate, but also in other asset classes. And yeah, and now and a few years ago, I decided to start documenting my journey through a blog, The Wandering Investor, that turned into a YouTube channel. So that's what I do full time, and we help people do the same thing as well.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Before we get into the real estate piece, I'm curious about the other asset classes that you pay
Stocks.
attention to. Oh, okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and not just emerging market, normal stocks that you would find like commodities, etc.
Gotcha. Okay. So as far as the real estate goes, what does your buy box look like? This is going to be interesting.
My buy box,
Yeah. What do you like to buy? What do you focus on?
primarily residential and land. I like
Yeah.
land. So residential for a yield and a combination of yield and capital appreciation in emerging markets, or sometimes just lifestyle because some of these places are just so amazing.
Right.
But land can be really good from a capital appreciation point of view.
Yeah. And so with that land, do you develop or are you holding and then selling off at the opportune time?
It depends. And sometimes I would say when in the US, when you do business and you're going to be and you buy a plot of land, you should have a business plan. You should know exactly what you're doing.
Yep.
In some of these countries, there's so much growth, there's so much volatility, things change so much from one day to another that you just buy, and then you have to remain open to various alternatives down the road.
Yeah.
So it's when you operate in countries that are very data poor and that are a lot less liquid than North America,
Mhm.
you just have to be a bit more flexible.
Yeah. So it's interesting because the liquidity piece is something that obviously I'm used to. I operate in the United States, so it's a much more liquid market for sure. How do you, before we hit record, we were talking about, I thought you might have been in Central America. It turns out you're in Montenegro, which is very far from Central America for those non-geography people out there. How do you decide where to go? And I know that your moniker is the Wanderer, but I'm sure there's a method to your madness.
Sure. So so essentially I have a map of the world in my head, and I spend a lot of time reading, and then I'll see countries that where there's some macro developments happening. And when a country ticks a few boxes from a macro development point of view, I'll go there and then spend a few weeks, a month, 2 months, and then I'll ask myself, do I want to play this market? And two, how can I play this market?
Yeah.
So, for example, a few years ago in 20, I don't know, 2018 or something, 2019, Uzbekistan in Central Asia was opening up. It had been essentially they had broken off from the Soviet Union, but the communist dictator was still in power. He died, a new guy came over, and he started rolling out the red carpet to foreign investors. So as soon as this happened, I went there, and my thinking initially was I'll buy an apartment right downtown. The ownership, the legality of ownership of real estate in Uzbekistan at that point was very much in the gray zone. I'm comfortable operating in the gray zone, but that one was a little too gray for me. So I spent more time sniffing around, and then I saw that there's a local stock exchange that no one really talks about. It wasn't even connected to the Bloomberg terminal or anything. Like there's just
Oh
no
my
barely
goodness.
any data, like a half broken website. I went to the stock exchange. It's like, how do I buy stocks? What do you guys have? And then they sent me to a broker, just one office. And then I just came across companies that had just no debt, that had a ton of cash on their balance sheets, that were spitting out dividends of 15% and that were growing 20, 30% a year
Wow.
at P ratios of 3. So I went to
Good
Uzbekistan
opportunity.
wanting to buy real estate, but then I left with a brokerage account.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'll go to a place and I can see the country's going to grow, but I just don't know how to play it because
Yeah.
real estate might already be very overvalued because it's the only means for people to save because they
Yeah.
don't trust the banks, their capital controls for local residents.
Yeah.
There's no stock market. They don't trust bonds. So just everything gets piled into real estate. And you look at that and you're like, do I really want to enter this market?
Right. It's
So
already played.
it depends.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there's a couple of there's a handful of boxes that you look to check before you enter a market. I'm curious. Can you tell me a little more about that?
I'm looking for catalysts. I'm looking for the potential for growth, or I'm just looking for a bottom.
Okay.
It depends. You have to be very flexible. It's all about flexibility, right? Sometimes I'll invest in places where everyone tells you do not invest. I've
Right.
been buying land in Nicaragua. If you look at US media, you'll hear that Nicaragua is a
Yeah.
communist dictatorship and this, and it's not investable and this and that. I'm buying land for probably a fifth or a sixth of the price compared to El Salvador. And the Chinese are just building out massive infrastructure throughout Nicaragua,
Yeah, they are.
right? And the country is a lot bigger and et cetera than El Salvador. So the place is not hyped up, but I'm seeing a lot of value. Now, am I saying that it's risk-free or that it's going to be easy money, et cetera? No, but I'm buying lots and I'm just sitting on them and I'm just going to revisit in 5 to 10 years. And if there's a revolution in the meantime, my lots aren't going to disappear. Even in
Cancel you.
Venezuela, they didn't go nationalize and seize. the assets of like just individual real estate investors. So flexibility is the name of the game, and
Yeah.
being diversified, not being all in.
So how do you manage that risk? Is it just it's just a matter of the time is your friend and you'll let things play out, or
Yeah, diversification. So I'll
okay,
have one part of my portfolio that is hyper liquid, again, stocks in Western markets. And then for real estate, I have a preference for but less liquid emerging and frontier market real estate that has more upside, but
okay,
also in many cases, a lot less downside. Because when you buy real estate in the US, and I'm certainly not here to criticize real estate in the US, I invested in the US before. The access to leverage is amazing. You do not have this when you venture overseas.
sure,
You're effectively just a cash buyer when you venture overseas. So it's a different game. If you want to become rich fast, invest in the US, get leverage, invest in the US.
yep,
Let's just be clear up front. Here I'm talking about international diversification. I'm not
sure.
promising better returns.
It's just more interesting.
It's more interesting for sure. So I lost my train of thought. What was your question again?
So I was asking about risk and how you manage that, and
Yeah. So look, the reality is when you invest in Western real estate, so by this Western European, North American, real estate is not a hard asset anymore. It is part hard asset, part financial asset. Real estate prices are extremely dependent on interest rates.
yeah,
So what you have is when you look at a multifamily unit, you think you have a multifamily unit. What you actually have is a derivative of interest rates of finance. It's a
right,
financial product that you have, like for
yeah,
the most part. So when I invest in these markets where there isn't any leverage, I'm paying the true value of real estate. I'm buying a real hard asset. So it means I have a lot more downside protection. So in many ways, my investments into emerging and frontier real estate markets are actually a bit less risky.
okay. So tell
I'm
me more
paying the
about that.
true value. I'm paying
Oh,
the
okay,
true value. Interest rates can go up, it won't change. If
right.
interest rates go down and banks start lending, then the party's on.
Interesting, interesting. So tell me about a deal that you looked at, it was worth getting on a plane for, or maybe this isn't the way you think about it. So you tend to actually, let me take a step back. So you tend to land in a place and then figure out what you're going to do, right?
Yeah.
So when you are looking at a market, tell me about a deal that you looked at, you thought it was interesting, and then something clicked that told you this is probably not the place to put your money, a deal you said no to.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A motivated seller just filled out your web form. If you call back within 5 minutes, you're nearly 4 times more likely to get that seller appointment. But delay your follow-up by even just 10 minutes? Forget it. You're toast. Ella Vista Connect calls that lead back in 60 seconds, qualifies them, and schedules your meeting. Find out how much slow follow-up is costing you. Free calculator at ellavista.com/underground.
I'll put it this way. The deals you want to say no to are the deals that you get too emotionally involved in.
Amen to that.
If you really don't have a clear thesis, right? Sometimes the thesis is not clear, but you see a few exits. It's fine. But sometimes there's no exit. There's really not any clear exit. So just be very careful because it's very easy to get emotionally involved in a deal, especially when you go to beautiful places around the world.
Indeed. Yeah.
And I
So,
invest mostly in beautiful places around the world because
uh,
that's where money likes to flow to. That's where money
right,
goes.
right.
Beautiful places around the world.
So let's talk about the portfolio. How do you have, I was looking at the map in preparing for this conversation, and there's a map on Ladislas' website that it talks about places he's traveled to and places he's lived. And you look at that map, and there are very few places you can't check that box that you've been to in some way, shape, or form. And I'm curious. Your assets are spread all over the world. How the heck do you manage that?
Property managers.
So you have local property managers in
Yeah.
every one of those areas.
Yeah, local property managers, and in every place I have a backup property manager as well, because
Okay.
that's if you need to be quick to fire property managers.
I
It's
do.
one of the downsides of investing in emerging markets. Often talent is a bit harder to find.
Yeah.
Once you have it, you're fine, but talent can be a bit harder to find. So it's not like the US where you can go into any random small town in Idaho or Wisconsin and there'll be a competent property manager that's trustworthy. In some of these markets, especially if you go into second, third tier cities, there's potentially no competent property manager that's honest.
And walk me through your week in terms of the process, or maybe it's a monthly effort where you are reviewing the performance of the property, dealing with any issues that have come up. Tell me more about that. Do you take more of a laissez-faire approach, or are you?
Absolutely. You can't go into these markets and be a micromanager.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to accept somewhat lower standards than you would be used to. If you are a micromanager, if you're a perfectionist, please do not venture into emerging market real estate. You will be miserable. Please don't do this.
Yeah.
And you will fail. You will absolutely fail. When you navigate in these countries, you have to accept that things won't be perfect. You have to lower your expectations in terms of people, and you operate in a very data poor environment typically. So there's a lot more following your guts.
Yeah. It's interesting. My father and I are very similar personalities. And when I was a teenager, he moved to California. And so I've born and raised on the East Coast US. So it's go. And we're in Southern California and we're in this shopping mall. And I'm walking up the escalator and I feel a tug on my belt. And my father looks at me and says, "Where are you going?" And he said, "Look around." And I looked around and I was actually the only person walking up the escalator. Everybody else was taking their time. And then when I got older, I started to travel to Denmark and Amsterdam and a few European cities. And in Denmark, one of my favorite places on earth, actually, the population, they barely drove cars. Everybody walked, everybody rode bikes. No one was in a hurry. And then I also experienced something that I was working for this gentleman. He was from Wales, and he was explaining to me cricket. And so we made this deal. I said, "I'll take you to a baseball game and I'll explain baseball and you can explain to me cricket." And the concept I could not get my head around is the fact that you can play cricket for 3 or 4 days and nobody wins. And yeah, it was as an American, it almost short circuited my brain. I was like, how can you spend that much time and no one wins? And what all these experiences taught me is that the world moves at a very different pace than it does here in the US. Even the differences between the Northeast and the Southeast and the West Coast are very different times 10 when you go into the rest of the world. I've never been to Africa or the Middle East or any, but I have friends that do a lot of business there and it's a very similar
Yeah.
pace. And it's interesting. What struck me was the fact that when you said you can't be a micromanager, I'm thinking type A personality, and be successful in international real estate investment, because those people just don't move with the expediency that they do here.
It's worse because then everyone turns against you. It's worse than that. It's not just that
Yeah.
you're not happy, but people suddenly think you're rude
Yeah,
and
you're
don't
the
want to
ugly
deal with
American
you
now, or
anymore.
the
And then
ugly whatever.
suddenly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then suddenly, like nothing, like literally no one will want to deal with you and people will just try to sabotage you. So look, this is quite extreme what I'm saying, but it's the case.
It's
You just need
reality.
to be a bit more chilled. Yeah. You just
Yeah.
need to be a bit more chill. And in terms of risk mitigation, two things. One, always hire some of the best lawyers in town. That's how I operate. Wherever I go, I just get some of the best local law firms. I don't try to be cheap when it comes to transactions, because there's just so many unknowns for you when you go into a deal. And if you use a cheap lawyer, the cheap lawyer will not necessarily understand the issues that a foreigner has when investing overseas. For example, in Colombia, you need to register your funds with the central bank so that you can get your funds out later. If you just go to a random lawyer, he'll tell you, oh, you just transfer the money directly to the seller and it's fine, or through escrow and it's fine. You'll be able to buy it. But when you sell in 7 years' time and you try to get money out of the country, the bank will ask you, oh, where's your central bank declaration? And suddenly you have a problem. So always use lawyers that are familiar with the issues that foreigners have when they invest so that they can really educate you properly and then protect you through the transaction. The second thing I'd say is, look, I'm very diversified across the world. I've invested in real estate in North America, South America, all over Europe, in Africa, like East Africa, West Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, really all over. I sleep very well at night because I'm so diversified that at any given point, something's blowing up in my portfolio. I'll give you that. But I know that something else in my portfolio is doing great. So I'm very resilient from that point of view.
Sure.
In spite of operational challenges and things not always going well, right, with every single project, I sleep very well knowing that I'm in a very secure place. And I think that's something that your audience should think of, right? A lot of your audience is entirely invested in the US, potentially in a single asset class, which is fine. It's worked out fantastic. And I'm certainly not telling people sell everything, the dollar's going to crash, blah, blah, blah. I'm not here. I'm not talking like this. But it's probably not unreasonable to have a small percentage of your assets outside of the single jurisdiction that is the United States. I think we see tension in the US, a lot of tension, an increasing amount of tension. People just do not get along. There's not just from an economic point of view, but from a social point of view. And there are just these, let's face it, there are some pretty sketchy things happening in the financial system. Is it that unreasonable to say, look, I'm going to take X percent and buy myself an apartment in Panama, or just deposit $200,000 in a bank in Panama and get residency for myself and my family? It's literally that easy. You just need to shift $200,000 from your bank account in the US to a bank in Panama, just one wire. And you just need to go to Panama three times in 2.5 years. Short flight. It'll be a nice vacation. And then you'll get your permanent residency after 2.5 years. And for the first 2.5 years, you have temporary residency. Once you have permanent residency, you just need to go back once every 2 years to keep it active. There you have it. You have your bank. You have your plan B. And after 3 years of that term deposit, you can send the money back to the US and keep your permanent residency. So just by shifting a bit of money around, you can just prepare pretty solid plan Bs. And Turkey's another one. You just invest $400,000 in any Turkish real estate. We're talking of a country of 80 million people. You can buy in Istanbul, a city of 15 million people.
Yeah.
You can get gross rental yields of 5 to 6%, which is decent for such a huge city. Keep the real estate for 3 years, or keep it for 5 years and then sell without local capital gains. They'll give you a citizenship within a year, a passport, a passport. Buy $400,000 of any Turkish real estate. They will give you full-fledged citizenship, a Turkish passport for you, your spouse, and your underage children. And then when your kids have children, they'll be, as long as they register the newborn at the Turkish consulate, that kid will be Turkish as well. So just by shifting $400,000 to Turkey for just a few years in real estate, you are building generational diversification. Like your grandchildren will have these passports. Your great-grandchildren will have these passports.
Yeah.
And we don't know what the world will look like in 100 years from now. Maybe people will be very happy to have a Turkish passport.
Very different is the only guarantee.
Yeah.
Wow, it's fascinating how you approach your life experience. And I'm curious about, you mentioned earlier that you're in Montenegro. So what drew you to that country?
I came here in 2016 on just a vacation, and I just saw how beautiful the place is. And then I just walked into a few real estate agencies, and I felt it was very undervalued compared to Croatia right up north.
Yeah.
And so I just started doing flip operations, just buying stuff, renovating, selling. And then over time, I built a portfolio here. I know I spend part of the year here in Montenegro.
Okay. Wonderful. So, where do you see opportunity right now in terms of real estate?
Personally, I'm investing quite a bit in Africa, more specifically Kenya. I bought 4 apartments there last year. And in a few weeks, I'm flying back to Kenya. I'm going to buy some apartments on the coast. Look, I bought apartments in the best neighborhood of Nairobi, which is the capital city of Kenya, which is also the economic and political hub of East Africa. The city of Nairobi is expected to double its population by 2050, 2060.
Wow.
So talk of strong demographics, right?
Yeah.
And I bought in the best neighborhood in a really cute street close to a big mall, but just great walkable area, great, very green as well, next to a park, beautiful church, the whole deal. And I bought apartments for 1 bedroom apartments for about $65,000, 70,000. 1 bedroom apartments with
US
swimming
dollars.
pool,
That's
US
a US
dollars,
dollar?
with,
Okay.
yeah, with heated indoor swimming pools, gym, playroom for the kids, the whole deal. So we're talking about like a net surface about $120 per square foot.
Wow.
So honestly, when I see this, and I'm expecting net rental yields of about 7 to 8%. It's like, how can you go wrong with this, right?
Yeah, that's a great deal.
Right. So sure, you'll see headlines in the next year or two of protests in Kenya and protesters getting killed by the police and this and that. And sure, maybe an IMF bailout, like, but it's fine.
That's also happening here, though. See, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Portland, Oregon, the list is getting longer, actually. Political and social unrest is everywhere. Okay. I would love to talk with you for hours and hours, but I know I only carved out an hour of your time and you've been very generous with it so far. We're going to move on to the lightning round right now, and then we can keep going. So I am interested in your purpose, right? What gets you out of bed on Monday morning? Your worldview is very different from mine for sure. And probably most of the folks here on the listening to this episode. So I'm curious, what gets you out of bed on Monday mornings?
Well, there's no such thing as a Monday morning for me. I'm always on.
Okay.
Except for Sunday mornings.
What got you out of bed this morning? How's that?
Maximizing freedom for my family.
Okay. So tell me more about that.
No government owns us. No government owns us. We're too diversified. We have too many different citizenships and residencies and this and that. Like, we're not happy somewhere, we leave. We feel that there's pressure to educate our children a certain way. That's it. We change jurisdictions. We're completely free.
You're truly a global citizen.
I wouldn't say global citizen in the sense that I value diversity in the sense that I want countries to remain different. I value I value when countries try not to change and try not to become globalized. Actually, I value this. So I'd say I'm just an individual, and that goes around, that wanders around. But I wouldn't use the term global because of its connotations.
Okay, fair enough. I'm curious about the mentors you've had in your life or the people that have impacted your life. What's the best advice you ever got, and who gave it to you?
A very good advice was given by my father. You don't have to answer every question.
And that's interesting. So tell me more about that. What does that mean to you?
You don't have to answer a question. Sometimes you incriminate yourself. Sometimes you put yourself in a very uncomfortable situation. And when you go into emerging markets where a lot of the communication is actually subliminal, it's not direct. It's not like you and I talking right now.
Sure.
They will say something, but mean something completely different. A bit like the Brits, actually, where whatever they say, it's the
Yeah.
opposite that they mean.
Right.
So you don't have to answer a question. Do not always answer questions.
Gotcha.
And it's something that's a little hard in the when you grew up as a, let's say, Anglo-Saxon Christian, where,
Yeah.
you have to be polite. Someone asks you a question, you answer. But that can actually land you in trouble down the line.
In many cases. And in fact, I'm notorious for that myself. That's good advice. So tell me about a decision that you look back on now that you have the perspective of time and you think, boy, I'd love to have that decision back. Tell me about a situation like that.
Yeah, so I made a mistake investing in West Africa. I got the macro right, but I got the specific investment wrong. So I invested in Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, a few years after the Civil War. There were just so many catalysts. I had to invest there. So I went there just for 10 days. I didn't have much time. I was still working back then. I still had a full-time job. And I tried to be smarter than some of the realtors that were actually giving me good advice, because one of them was a buyer's agent charging an extra fee. And I was like, I don't even know. So then I ended up buying an investment that was just turned out to be very suboptimal. So even though the market boomed, absolutely boomed. So I had that right, but the one investment I bought, the one house, just stayed flat. I completely missed out on the boom. So I think there are two key learnings here. Is one, when you just go to a new market just for a week or two and you try to buy real estate, which is going to be the case of most of your audience if they try to go buy something in like Italy or Panama or Costa Rica or wherever, just understand that your biggest risk is making a mistake, right? It's not like you should aim for market level. If you manage to get market level, you did well, because it means that you managed to just in 1 week understand and not get screwed.
Right.
And that's a big win. Because most people go and in 1 week, suboptimal, boom, they hit below the market. They don't do well. So just go in there with managing your expectations and trying not to be too greedy, because when you end up in these kind of lower tier investments, it's because you tried to be too greedy and you didn't quite understand the market. Two is don't hesitate to pay for a buyer's agent that really understands the market. Like, sure, he'll charge you 3%, but you're going to get that ROI.
Yeah,
You're going to get that
that's
ROI.
it's just like your advice on hiring the best attorney you can find. It's money well spent.
Don't be cheap. Don't be cheap. I think we all know this. We're all real estate investors, but also we're real estate investors, and
Yeah. Was it for a deal?
we tend to be a little cheap.
Right. Yeah.
We know we shouldn't, but we are.
If I can pay 65 cents on the dollar, I will. Yeah, that's funny and very true. So I'm curious about how you take in information and to become smarter and to learn more. What's the book or whatever information source on your physical or virtual nightstand? Like, how do you take in information, and from a author or creator perspective, who are you paying attention to?
Look, that's a good question. So I'll read all the usual stuff, New York Times, The Economist, blah, blah, like the normal stuff. I'll go into also kind of rabbit hole stuff as well, because it trains you to think differently. You don't necessarily have to agree with the rabbit hole, but they essentially disagree with everything. So you always have thesis, antithesis, thesis, antithesis.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, it just trains you to look at things from different perspectives. But when I read a book, I'm not going to read a business book. I absolutely not. I'll read history. I'll read literature. The goal being getting a greater understanding of the people and cultures I deal with. Because I'm not going to get that through YouTube videos or a short article.
No,
I'm going to get that through reading their literature and reading their history.
Couldn't agree more. So finish the sentence for me. What does success means what to you?
Being a good man.
It's
passing the judgment of God.
Good luck. And as a fellow human being, it's the never-ending competition between the voice in your head and the voice of God has got to be a bit of a challenge, right? Ladislav, I really enjoyed this conversation and congratulations on the life you've built for you and your family. And I wish you all the best. When you're not talking about real estate or hunting for the next opportunity, what do you enjoy doing?
Spearfishing in Montenegro.
Okay. Excellent. And so if people want to learn more about you or your travels or your investments, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. So we have a newsletter, Notes from the Road newsletter on thewanderinginvestor.com. So as I travel around the world, I talk about real estate, residency options, citizenships. We also help people obtain citizenship by investments if they just want to buy a passport, for example. We help with that. I have a YouTube channel as well, The Wandering Investor. I'm on X, Instagram, all of that. And we have an event coming up in Argentina, in Buenos Aires in March. And that one is really exciting. So it'll be full days. It's an investor tour. We're expecting about 30 people. There's still a few spots left. And 2 days we'll have economists coming over, professors, venture capital, private equity, and we'll go to some of the largest listed Argentinian companies. Some of them have ADRs in New York. Actually, we'll go to their headquarters. We'll see how do they operate in that environment, how the reforms are impacting them. And then we'll have 2 days of full real estate viewings on the secondary market.
Wow, what a great opportunity. I'll make sure that we put the information in our show notes so that we can spread the word on that. Ladislas Maurice, thank you so much for joining us today. This has truly been an honor and a pleasure. And like I said, continued good travels, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Ed.
This has been The Real Estate Underground. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, Undergrounders, remember your real estate journey begins with a simple step forward. Now get to it. Bye for now.